Good Wednesday afternoon to you from Telesur and the Reagan Devines in Caracas, Venezuela. Thank you so much for being here with us on From the South. Russia's parliament has unanimously approved a request by President Vladimir Putin for the deployment of military forces to Syria, where they will only use their air force to bomb Islamic State group targets. They will not deploy ground troops. According to Putin's chief of staff, Sergei Ivanov, they will notify the U.S. of all airstrikes through an intelligence gathering center in Iraq's capital, Baghdad. He explained that the parliament's decision was made in response to a request from Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. And Ivanov also said that the Russian airstrikes will be in line with international law because they were invited to do so by Syria. This in contrast with the U.S.-led airstrikes, which are being carried out with absolute disregard to the country's sovereignty.
As you know very well, certain countries are already carrying out missile attacks and are bombing in Syria, Iraq, and in future similar actions may be carried out in other states in the Middle East. The United States were the first. France recently joined in with similar actions. Australia and a series of other countries are saying they will do the same.
Israel carried out an airstrike on the Gaza Strip again last night. The Zionist forces claimed that the attack was in response to a rocket fired by Palestinian militants into southern Israel, although it is unclear who launched it. According to military officials, the rocket was shot down by a missile defense system, and they replied with 4 overnight strikes. No injuries or damages were reported. Dozens of Palestinians have been injured in the last few weeks in the West Bank as Israeli forces fired their gas and grenades at those protesting the violation of their holy sites. And it escalated quickly in Jerusalem when Israeli police attempted to arrest young Palestinian men who they say were disturbing the peace. In the end, 4 were taken into custody. Now, this all occurred during the Jewish festival of Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles to the Christian community, in Jerusalem's Old City, where thousands gathered to pray. The community has called on Israeli and Palestinian authorities to resume peace talks in an attempt to quell a long-standing, tense and often destructive relationship. Palestinians are also celebrating that today their flag will be risen for the first time at the United Nations headquarters. Another long-time conflict which has been brought up in the UN General Assembly is the one in the Western Sahara. Now, African nations demanded this Tuesday the liberation of this territory, which has been occupied by Morocco for 40 years now, and which has been expecting a referendum on self-determination for 20 years. Namibian President Hage Geingob called for the urgent implementation of all Security Council and General Assembly resolutions, while Zimbabwe's Robert Mugabe said he was deeply concerned by allegations of Moroccan repression of ethnic Sawari living under the Moroccan occupation. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari compared the situation to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The United States have confirmed that they will not seek extradition of members of the FARC after the peace agreement, which last week between the guerrilla group and the Colombian government. Now, last month, a bill was presented to the Colombian Congress that would prevent any member of the FARC from being extradited to the United States. Extraditions to the U.S. have been one of the largest sources of foreign aid for the Colombian state over the past 15 years. According to the Washington Office of Latin America, nearly every FARC leader is wanted by U.S. courts or prosecutors to face drug trafficking charges, which the guerrilla group denies. Some members of the FARC are already serving prison sentences in the U.S., including FARC's leader Simon Trinidad, who was captured and extradited in 2004 on drug charges. And Telesur interviewed FARC's leader Timoleon Jimenez, known as Timochenko, about the peace agreements. He said that the birth of the guerrilla movement was a result of the violence across the state.
What the U.S. did in 1948 was a mistake. what happened, the OAS meeting, the killing of Gaitan. In the specific case of Colombia, they imposed a security doctrine, and that doctrine is still in all the instruments of power. And this is what generates violence, and the guerrilla is the answer to that violence.
Regarding the soldiers, prisoners of war, Timoshenko put the blame of them not being freed on the Colombian government only.
These must be assumed by the state. The state had the opportunity for us to release the prisoners from the very first day they were captured, but the state refused. The Israelis have sometimes released even hundreds of Palestinians in exchange for one soldier. The government here always refused to do that. Only one time, when they freed about 10 partners who were sick, and we freed over 300, and we carried on with this struggle for humanitarian exchange, but the state always refused.
Now we've been following the UN General Assembly in the States, and now we go to our correspondent in the United States, Bianca Perez. Hi Bianca, now firstly the President of Palestine spoke today at the Assembly General. At the same time, the Palestinian flag has been risen for the first time at the UN, which is a big deal. How important do you think these steps are toward the recognition of the state of Palestine?
Hi Regan, how are you? Yes, as you mentioned, the President of Palestine, in fact, spoke this morning before the UN's General Assembly, and the flag was also raised. The importance of this, from speaking with various analysts, is that this is seen as a first step towards perhaps an acceptance by many world powers of the importance of Palestine's sovereignty. However, analysts have also told us that although this can be seen as this first step or a step forward, there is still no posture being made by the big world leaders before the UN asking for Israel to remove themselves from Palestinian territory. As we know, there's still the occupation and there is still a genocide going on in this territory, which many of the citizens have suffered. So although it can be seen as a step forward or a first step in that direction, there is still much that needs to be done, as the President of Palestine also mentioned during his speech, so that they can feel that they are truly being given the recognition before the UN that they are asking for.
Of course, Israel has some very powerful backers. Now, secondly, important issues have been brought up during the past session, such as the lifting of the blockade on Cuba. Presidents Castro and Obama met after their speeches and spoke about this and about the occupied territory at Guantanamo. Do you think we could expect any announcements related to this at all anytime soon?
Well, Regan, this is very complex. I've spoken to a lot of experts about this topic as well, and the issue with an expectation for something or an announcement of this sort soon is the fact that currently the power to lift the blockade and to end the occupation of Guantanamo is in the hands of Congress, of the US Congress, and experts believe that with this Congress that is currently in place, it will be very difficult to come to a decision to remove the blockade, to end the blockade and to remove the troops from Guantanamo and return the territory to Cuba. Although, you know, this is a topic that has been discussed for many years before the UN, and many world leaders support the end of the blockade. Everyone except really the United States and Israel as their main supporter. But it will be very difficult to hear anything anytime soon. This is going to be something that will probably take a very long time of discussions to come to some sort of solution.
Bianca, there's also been quite a bit of controversy now over the situation in Syria, and just today we found out that Russia approved the deployment of military forces supposedly to attack Islamic State targets. Cristina Fernandez's speech was also very strong on this, with some serious accusations. Have there been any reactions there to that at all?
Well, yes, there have been some reactions. Obviously, the media in the United States has expressed a lot of about the Russian airstrikes in Syria. It is important to note, however, that the Russian government has stated their position in this was they were asked by the Syrian government to help them in their fight for the self-proclaimed Islamic State. Recently, Secretary of State John Kerry spoke before the UN. He expressed that you know, the Russian government, I'm sorry, has criticized the U.S. for their airstrikes, but they're currently doing the same thing. It is important to note that the Russians have stated multiple times that they're doing this to help the current president of Syria, who asked them directly to do this. The United States' involvement and their allies, however, is more towards the opposition, and it is against the Syrian government. So their involvement is a little different. And Secretary of State John Kerry says that they will continue their efforts to help fight the Islamic State, but it is important to know the difference between the two countries' involvement. I think something else, Regan, that we might want to highlight was Donald Trump, who is a pre-candidate for next year's presidential election, actually was in admiration, in a way, of Putin's posture before Syria. He claimed that he was a true leader, as opposed to what President Obama has shown recently before the UN. So it was just interesting to see that, in internal politics here in the US, there are also reactions being made regarding this topic. This is obviously something that is a very significant topic around the world.
And of course, we all know that this guy that you just called thinks that he can calm Putin down in terms of stabilizing U.S.-Russia relations. Thanks so much, Bianca, for your update. We'll touch base another time.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Regan.
Moving on now, Argentina will launch its second satellite, ARSAT-2, this afternoon. Almost a year ago, it was the first Latin American country to design, build and launch into space its very own telecommunications satellite called ARSAT-1. Back then, the government said it was another step forward toward greater sovereignty, not just for the southern cone nation, but for all the peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean. Today's launching shows that the new kid on the block in satellite technology is here to stay. More now with Laureano Pounce.
Looking towards even greater satellite sovereignty, Argentina will launch its second geostationary telecommunications satellite, ARSAT-2, into outer space from French Guiana this week.
The fact that we've launched 2 satellites made in Argentina and put them into Argentina's orbital positions shows that we've achieved what was once a dream and is now a reality.
Around $250 million were invested into the design and construction, made entirely in Argentina by state-owned operated enterprises ARSAT and ENVAP.
It's another step forward to what we here at ARSAT and in Argentina consider our goal, a Latin American satellite industry.
This new Argentine satellite will cover a vast extension of the Americas, from the Malvinas Islands in the deep southern cone and all the way up to the US. All Latin American and Caribbean nations will be covered by ARSAT-2.
I am enormously proud to be a part of this group of professionals that have carried out the ARSAT project and to have the chance to put in together a team that will further develop Argentina's space industry and why not promote it around the entire region.
Argentina is part of a select group of only 8 nations which have the capacity to build and operate their own satellites. ARSAT-2 took less than half the time to be designed and built compared to its predecessor, ARSAT-1, launched in 2014, which confirms that Argentina is serious about becoming a worldwide leader in satellite technology. Leo Bolete, Telesur, Buenos Aires.
With 1 year since the forced disappearance of the 43 Ayotzinapa students, many in Mexico are wondering what will be the next steps for the social movement and the demand for truth and justice in the case. As the authorities say that the investigation will continue, others argue that more radical changes need to occur, while others say that lessons need to be learned from Mexico's 1968 student massacre. Our correspondent Clayton Khan has more.
Here in this forum, survivors of the 1968 student massacre reflect with survivors of the police attack on the Ayotzinapa students in Iguala, Guerrero. Those from 1968 share their advice on how to pressure for truth and justice in the Ayotzinapa case.
The proposal I would give to the parents and comrades from Ayotzinapa would be, on the one hand, to have the social movements on your side, struggling for the punishment of those responsible and not letting the movement die, and on the other hand, to have the law and legal resources at hand so as to punish and try those responsible.
Meanwhile, in front of the UN General Assembly, Mexico's President Enrique Peña Nieto ensures that the authorities are committed to the defense of the population's human rights.
Mexico is a nation that is fully committed to the rule of law, human rights, and peace.
However, that sentiment is not widely shared at home. In the wake of the forced disappearance of the 43 Ayotzinapa students 1 year ago, many call for measures beyond just changing political leaders.
When we say memory, truth, and justice, in reality we are saying a different state. We are saying a different form of social organization, a different way that is not this one.
In this past weekend's Ayotzinapa anniversary marches, the same reflection was echoed.
I think one of the big lessons is that we confront a system that does not practice self-criticism, that does not recognize its own errors.
Yet the families of the missing and killed students argue that a year of constant organizing protests and social pressure has forced Mexican authorities to accept a degree of blame.
Despite the fact that the Mexican state has bet this case in Ayotzinapa will be forgotten in many people's minds, however, there are things that strengthen us today to believe that the search must continue, the investigation must continue.
And it will continue, given that a team of experts from the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights has agreed to advance an independent investigation for at least another 6 months. The Inter-American Commission will also give its full report on the overall situation of human rights in Mexico in early 2016, which they say at this point continues to be in a deeply concerning state. Clayton Cantela Sur, Mexico City.
Pope Francis spoke this morning about his recent trip to Cuba and the US, which he described as emblematic. The pontiff arrived this Monday to the Vatican after a journey in which he chose a non-antagonizing approach with any of the countries. He has played a very important role in the renewal of diplomatic ties between the two, and he reiterated the need to build a bridge that he added is being reconstructed.
I and the Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, for the welcome I received. I thank from my heart my brother priests and all the organizers for the great work that was carried out and for the love of the Church which built them.
To Ecuador now, where the Progressive Latin American Encounter, ALAP, ends today in Quito, the capital. During the last 3 days, attendees have discussed the challenges the left powers face in the region. Our correspondent at our Quito office, Gustavo Fuchs, has been following the event. Hi, Gustavo, good to chat with you. Can you please summarize for us what has been said at the encounter?
Hi, Reagan. Well, the conference has been a great success. There have been delegates from Asia, from the Middle East, from Europe, from the indigenous people here in Ecuador, Afro-descendants. A wide array of issues have been talked about. The Palestine issue, the Kurdish situation right now in Syria, in Iraq, and the Islamic State, foreign policy in general, the reapproachment of Cuba and the U.S. So far, it has been a great event.
That's good to know. Well, during the conferences, we understand that the participants have discussed the importance of the unity of Latin American peoples and the popular participation in the revolutionary processes, which is, of course, something that regional leaders have always been fighting for. Can you give us some pertinent information in relation to this that has been said, and what have the conclusions been?
Well, in regards to Latin American unity, well, there is a very, very strong commitment by all of the movements here and all of the delegates that the current governments that are ruling most of the region, let's say mostly South America, should keep being elected. For example, we heard Vice President from Bolivia, Álvaro García Linera, telling us about how the President Evo Morales is going to face a new referendum campaign to be able to go for re-election. We also discussed the issue of Malvinas. For example, there was a lot of solidarity from all of the movements. We're expecting that the final declaration that would be issued today will include these points, and also support for the current presidential candidate in Argentina, Daniel Scioli, which is seen overwhelmingly as the continuation of Cristina Fernandez's government. And basically, the steps that are being taken here to strengthen unity are more coordination, more communication between parties, and more efforts towards building a new cultural hegemony in the region that really helps us bring these issues on top of the agenda in public debate.
Gus, thank you so much for the update. I'm sure we can get more of your work on our website, telesurtv.net/English. Of course, since you've been following the very historic occasion. Thanks again. Moving on now, despite various appeals for clemency, including one by Pope Francis, Kelly Gisson-Daner became the first woman to be executed in the U.S. state of Georgia in 70 years. She was executed by lethal injection just after midnight, prison officials said. Gisson-Daner was sentenced to death for her role in plotting the killing of her husband back in 1997. She is now the 16th woman to be executed since the U.S. reinstated the death penalty in 1976.
At 12:21 on September 30th, 2015.
She apologized for what she did. She said she was sorry that that amazing man lost his life because of her. And once after the execution started, she began singing Amazing Grace and sang it all the way through.
International sanctions are still imposed on Russia for their alleged involvement in the actions of separatists in East Ukraine. Now, Arseniy Yatsenyuk, Ukraine's prime minister, said that he is adopting a decision to ban flights by Russian companies, primarily Aeroflot and Transaero, to Ukraine. He also said that Russian military planes will be banned from landing on Ukrainian soil. And in response to the Ukraine-imposed air ban, Russian Minister of Transport Maxim Sokolov retorted that Ukrainians will be the ones most affected by the ban, adding that at least 70% of passengers flying from Ukraine to Russia and back this year have been Ukrainian citizens. Additionally, Russia has now imposed a ban of its own onto Ukraine flights entering Russia. To the Caribbean now, Jamaica, which is a former British colony, is asking Britain for billions of dollars which would serve as reparations for the era of slavery. Jamaica's Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller raised the issue with British Prime Minister David Cameron as they met to strengthen bilateral ties. Now, Cameron did not immediately respond to Simpson Miller's demands. However, it should be noted that in the past, the British government has not entertained the possibility of reparations for slavery. Cameron is scheduled to address the Jamaican Parliament today, where it is hoped that he addresses the island nation's request. Portugal's October 4th legislative elections are around the corner, and one candidate is promising an ease to the austerity imposed by the current centre-right administration. Former mayor of Lisbon and centre-left Socialist Party candidate Antonio Costa says that he will amend wages, cut taxes, and create more jobs. Recent polls suggest that neither party holds a clear lead. Costa warned the public of the dangers of voting Portugal's ruling Portugal Ahead PAF coalition back into power.
To not leave anyone with any doubts, Passos Coelho said, "I don't need to present a program because our program is known. It's what we did the last 4 years, and that's what we'll do for the next 4 years. Therefore, one thing is certain. If a center-right coalition wins, you know what's to come. Less wages, less dignified work, less jobs, more austerity. That's what they promise, and that's what they'll do."
Global warming combined with natural phenomena like El Nino will result in high temperatures this year as well as next year in 2016. More on this next.
According to experts of the Meteorological Service of the United Kingdom, 2015 and 2016 could be among the hottest years ever registered. British scientists also state that the El Niño phenomenon has local implications, with drier conditions in some Asian countries and in Australia. They even forecast that the fall and winter seasons will have more rainfall in the state of California in the United States, that has lived an intense drought for the past 4 years. The Meteorological Service also foresees that the cooling in the Atlantic Ocean could lead to cooler and drier summers in the north of Europe.
The Lord of the Rings arrow-wielding hero elf known as Legolas made a surprise appearance at a migrant reception center near the Greek-Macedonian border. Well, not really him, but the actor who played Legolas did. Orlando Bloom, best known for his appearance on the successful Lord of the Rings trilogy, as well as his work on the film Pirates of the Caribbean, is lending his face to the refugee crisis in his capacity as UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador. The footage suggests that not many of the Syrian refugees there knew who the actor was. However, they were grateful for the coverage of their plight as they escape war to find better lives in European countries. And in our final story this afternoon, take a look at this video. It's from a drone as it captured footage of the world's longest glass-bottomed suspension bridge. Would you walk on that? If yes, let me tell you where it is. It's located in the Xinhuizhai National Geological Park in China. The bridge hangs 590 feet above the Hunan province and was created using glass panes 24 millimeters thick and 25 times stronger than regular glass. For more on these and other stories, please visit our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Regan Devines. We hope you can join us for our major newscast this evening. Until then, have a great afternoon.